From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. In today's podcast, I'm going to sit down with my good friend Michael Killen and talk about his new book, Sell Futures, Not Features. This book is really a must read if you're at all concerned about sales. So grab the book and sit down, relax, and enjoy the conversation that Mike and I had. This episode of the STM show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. In today's podcast, I'm here with my good friend Mike Killen, and what we're going to talk about is his new book, Sells Futures, Not Features, which launches this week. How are you today, Mike?
I am really, really good. Thanks, Robbie. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's great to have you again, and it's always great to talk about some of your writing because a lot of people read your material. I've read your previous book. It's well written, and I'm sure the new one when it comes out will be just as great to read.
I hope so. I mean, we're we're literally hours away from launching, and I'm still finding the occasional typo. So they make themselves very obvious when you feel like you've submitted them. But yeah, this is one I've been wanting to get out for a while. It's the previous one was very marketing agencies and funnels and quite specific. This one's a broader sales book for just entrepreneurs and business owners in general.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for some quick background, I know you've been on the podcast with me before.
Yeah.
What are you working on these days? What's your focus besides the
Predominantly,
book?
it's my main focus is on sell your service as a business, and we have a flagship program which is running at about 15,000 US.
Mhm.
So that's our kind of my core focus. I'm trying to get the sales team ramped up and make sure that they're fed and watered and healthy and whatnot. So a lot of my time is on sales calls, sales training up the sales team, and just really helping the other members of my team kind of see the fruits of their labor, because it's all well and good everyone creating content day in day out, but when we start being able to turn readers into leads and into sales, I think that's when people finally see it click.
Yeah.
It can feel a bit sort of ethereal beforehand, so that's the part we're doing now, is putting the hammer down on the sales conversion part, and it seems to be going okay. But catch up with me in 6 months' time and see if I'm saying the same thing. So
Oh, we'll be talking, I'm sure.
yeah.
I have to ask you, is your sales process, because your product is a higher value, is it a longer sales process, or do you manage to close pretty short? Do you mind sharing?
No, not at all. Not gladly. If I even go over this in the book, it's about well, we have case studies of customers that we have closed, whereby I have reached out to them on day one completely cold, and by day 14 they have bought. We tend to do some kind of outreach. We qualify quite quickly, and then we get them on a 10-minute call just
Yeah.
to qualify them, make sure that they're suitable for us and we're suitable for them, and then we'll take them through to a 45-minute conversation whereby we'll either take full payment or a deposit or something. I would say about a third close on that call, and then the next the next 2/3 require follow-up,
Yeah.
and they can be anywhere from between 30 to 90 days, I would have to guess, if I'm looking at my tracker now, if that's accurate. So it can be up to about 3 months, but it's not terribly involved. It's just making sure you're catching up with people, sending them 4, 5, 6, 7 messages. So those are the splits, I think, at the moment.
Yeah. And I think the reason I ask that question is we all know that sometimes the higher value takes a little longer to close. Sometimes shorter products take
Yeah,
less time to close. So,
yeah. But I think a big part of it is to do um, with your finding and talking to the right people.
yep.
I was hesitant to have 2 phone calls for a long time until um, someone else explained to me, like, if you have 2 phone calls, you'll end up having fewer phone calls in the long run.
Mhm.
And so that's been a big help, is making sure that we're going after the right customers. But it, I've had people, in fact, again, like talking of the book, I've already had people saying to me, "Oh, have you got like because I think I launch it for like it's 99 cents on Kindle, and then we do it for the lowest possible price for the hardcover and for the paperback." And I already have people saying to me like, "Oh, have you got a discounted version?" I'm like, "It's 99 cents. I physically can't go lower than that. Well, I suppose
No,
I could go
and,
free."
and
So yeah,
honestly, I've already pre-ordered at the time of
that's
this way,
very
or
good of you. Yeah.
after the book launches. I've pre-ordered both the Kindle and the paperback, and I'll tell
Oh,
you,
thank you very much. Oh, good.
you're welcome, and I'll tell you why. Um, I love Kindle books for searchable. So if I'm searching
Oh,
something
yeah, yeah,
quickly
yeah.
for reference, I love to search them. But I'm a I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I have on this podcast. I'm a book a week guy.
Yep.
So, kind of the way I do reading is I give up an hour of TV every day
Yeah.
and I read. And that
Yep.
hour is often before bed. And one of the things that I do is I read a hardcover or paperback book because I don't want the screen time before bed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I've got,
100%.
and the other role I've got interesting, and I'll mention it to you just for fun. Every 2 business books I read, the third one has to be a pleasure book. So that's
Yeah, it can get a little bit heavy. That's interesting. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, especially in the morning. I find
I
if I'm walking or
yeah,
exercising or driving the car, that's a good time for me to catch up. But I tend to get the Kindle version exactly as you stated for reference, to be
yeah.
able to search it.
And I'm an Audible guy too. And being a podcaster, at last count, I've got like 31 podcasts on my podcast catcher, just a
Yeah,
few.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm one of these guys, Mike, I can't work in silence. So if I'm not
Right.
recording or I'm not audio editing, I've probably got something on in the background. And you
Yeah,
often it's an Audible
yeah.
or a podcast. So I want to dive into the topic because I
Let's do it.
said to you before we went to record, I love this topic.
Good.
Self futures, not features. And
Yeah,
the reason I find this topic so compelling, spending a lot of time in the WordPress web design space, spending a lot of time in email marketing space, which you and I both do,
yeah,
spending a lot of time with clients. Clients get hung up often on what they're using. Are they using WordPress?
yeah, yeah,
Are they using ConvertKit? Are they using Infusionsoft? Whatever they're using to do their marketing. And I say, does it matter?
yeah,
What matters to me is getting clients results
yeah,
and getting them leads that convert to sales. Your
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. 100%. And years ago, when I was coaching much more heavily in the WordPress space, I used to say to people, like, I'm building my business from the standpoint that one day WordPress might not be around.
Hmm.
You have no idea what the future is in hold, right? And we've seen this time and time again. People do it. I mean, you've got the extremes. We've actually, you and I have talked about this before, where you have people building their businesses on Facebook and YouTube, and
Yep.
that company changes the algorithm and the bottom of your business falls out. To me, exclusively basing your entire business around a tool or a platform is falling into the same trap. So as long as I have my database, and we've talked a lot about CRMs, that to me is the important asset, because most marketing tools or website tools or whatever, they've got to the point where they're much of the same now, frankly.
Hmm.
And what I want to think is, what is the most amount of results I can get out of what I currently have or what I'm capable of using. And I think it kind of comes from two sides. As sellers and vendors and experts, we often rely heavily on trying to sell the platform. As I say, we try to sell the features and the details. And customers sometimes will latch onto that as well, because it's often their only frame of reference, it's their only anchor point.
Yeah.
And if we as experts haven't done a good enough job saying, well, what we want to do is, warm up the pipeline first and then re-engage with people and then follow up and blah, blah, blah. As you state, it actually shouldn't matter what the technology is that does it. It's, are we using the best strategy we have available using the resources that we have at hand? And I think a lot of people try to rely on selling the platform because that's their anchor point. That's all they understand, and it's a signature to me that they don't understand enough about the strategy. I don't know if you think that's fair or not, because I know that you're heavily involved on both sides.
I truly think that's fair. I think you're like 100% on the money, because I actually think selling the platform, and I think the only place I even try and sell the platform a little bit is one of the services I offer are WordPress security services. So it's really
Sure,
hard in that particular niche type of service not to sell the platform, because that's platform specific.
sure,
But beyond that, I rather sell my clients results every day of the year. If we do this, you will get potentially this if you do it right. I think
yeah,
that's more important.
yeah,
And we were kind of talking, you were talking a little bit about the social. And I
yeah,
want to dive into that a little bit because it's important. We
yeah,
know back in November, December, Facebook had a 1 day outage. And
yep,
what I'll
yep,
share with you is I have a new client who, on that 1 day outage, because he was only selling his products in the Instagram marketplace, which is part of the Facebook ecosystem, he
yep,
figures he lost $27,000 US.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy,
And
isn't it?
we can't keep relying on those platforms because they keep changing the algorithms, they keep changing the rules, they keep making it really, really hard. I mean, I was sharing with you my ongoing problem how I can't post my own domain on
Yeah,
Facebook, and it's been like that
yeah,
forever. And it's getting even more difficult with things like tracking cookies not being blocked and all kinds of things going on. And I truly think we're getting to the point on the web where companies are just going to say, okay, we can't track you, so our service is now $10 a month. Do you want it or
right.
don't you? I think we're
Yeah.
headed there. I really do.
Well, and here's something that's perhaps a bit controversial. I think businesses should be saying that, as in, I think it's an advantage, because
Yep.
if 50 years ago, if we were selling widgets, if you and I said, all right, let's go into business and let's start selling some widgets, and we wanted to advertise, so we went to the TV, went to radio, went to magazine, and if those companies said, that's fine, we can do that for you, but we can give you zero information about who you're going in front of, what the metrics are, what the results are, what the number of reads are, we'd be like, well, that's kind of useless, but our hands are tied. So why don't we measure the success of the campaign via how much money we make? And then we would hold the media buyer to account. And we would say, you know, we've bought media from you, but we haven't made sales. Nothing's gone through. You can't provide us insight on how that's working. So why would I continue to work with you? And
Yep.
so by measuring the conversion at the actual point that it really matters, which is the cash flow side, I think it holds those types of businesses to more accountability. And I think we should start saying, all right, well, we're just going to start. We're going to start making sure that we measure it via the physical money we make. And if you can't provide insight on that bit that happens in the middle, then we don't have to use you. Evidently, you're missing out on something. So there's some funny changes which have been happening recently that a lot of people have seen coming for a while, and I don't know. Maybe it'll end up making things better. But that maybe I'm going into conspiracy theory
No,
nonsense.
I don't think you are. I mean, we know the EU's taken a hard line. We know in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
U.S., California is starting to take a hard line.
yep,
We know countries like Australia have taken a hard line. There's all kinds of controversy in Australia with platforms using newspapers and journals and
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that. And by the way, Canada's taken a hard line.
yeah.
So it
Did
just seems the only one not taking a hard line is the global US, and it's something
yeah.
I don't get.
No, I don't know. And it's but there's always, I don't know. I suppose I see it from both sides in some respects. There's always something. Like before the pandemic, it was Brexit. Before that, it
Yeah,
was, I can't even remember what it's called now. The GDPR. There's always something which is going to prevent and stand in the way of people and commerce. Um, and that's sort of half the battle, I suppose, is
yeah,
is making sure that you can overcome that, because there's always a reason to not buy.
yeah.
Um,
It's
so
true.
yeah.
Now, it's worth mentioning too, before we move on, is the only two things you really own is your website and your emailing list, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and even even my website seems to be becoming more and more outsourced, because I have people working on it, or
Yeah,
one has people working on it. And the reality is, and I would say this, I've said this before, and I will say it again, I no doubt in the future. If I had to choose between losing my website and losing my database, I'd rather lose the website. As
I would
difficult as that
agree.
would be, I would rather keep the database of people who know who I am, because that's ultimately where the relationships are built. And I think a lot of people, there must become some kind of like stoic philosophy paradox whereby the more you value the concept of the website, the more you have to appreciate that one day that resource could just disappear.
Hmm.
And I think you have to build that into your business as well. I think you have to, as you state, Facebook went down. I mean, um, uh, AWS servers recently
Oh,
have had a bit of a time of it,
yep.
and people's entire applications are on that. Not one, multiple applications are hosted on that thing. Um, so it's only going to become at some point where you won't even be able to get into your house,
Yeah.
because your
I've
keys are
heard
all
of that case
broken.
happening, actually.
It has, yeah,
Yeah,
it has happened.
yes,
It
I've
has
heard
happened.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is crazy, right? Like
yeah.
you, or have you ever heard of Juicero?
I have.
Which to me is just that. To me is the height of people confusing what, like, the Internet of Things and why connectivity can be such a benefit. And you're right, it basically meant, well, if your router, your phone line, your ISP, or someone's server somewhere doesn't work, you can't use your juicing machine.
Yep.
What a dumb, unbelievably, I can't remember what they call it. Is it breakage point? There's so many points of failure in that to be able to just get some juice.
Yep.
And we are slowly, and thing is, a lot of businesses are built that way. A lot of businesses are Juicero brands. They just don't know it, until something breaks and goes wrong, and then all of a sudden it's woe is me. But you can see it coming if you pay attention to it.
It's true. Okay, so let's go back to this. You say you should sell futures. Do you
Yeah,
want to expand on that a little bit?
yeah, of course. So I believe that human beings are goal-driven animals. I think we all move towards goals, and whatever those goals might be, and we can kind of talk all day about big goals, small goals, whatever. And I think too many businesses believe that the strength of their product is in the features,
Hmm.
whereas we have seen repeatedly that a customer is more likely to buy when their vision of their life is better, the future vision of their life is better compared to where it is now. And your job is to explain that vision to them and help them believe in that. And it just so happens that your product is a really good way to get there. So that's what I tend to mean by to sell futures, not features. Sell the happy lifestyle that people are looking for,
Yeah.
um, and for anything. And I so the kind of the tagline, I suppose, for the book is, how any entrepreneur or business owner can find hidden desirable benefits no matter how boring their product is, even if they aren't confident in their product, that are so compelling and desirable that you can't help but sell more of them. No matter what it is you're selling, I think we can find hidden, desirable, compelling benefits to it that will obviously increase sales and increase your prices. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, I suppose.
Yeah, that's so true. I think a lot of people we're talking about earlier in this business, they also get caught on the whole shiny tool syndrome, and we
Yeah,
know what that's like.
yeah,
And somebody new up at GoDaddy posted a question there. They said, "What's your favorite WordPress plugin?" And my response was, "It depends what you need it for, and
yeah,
the one you use." And I
yeah,
wasn't being sarcastic or condescending.
yeah.
I'm not a big fan in my business of switching around tools, de- depending on the flavor of the day. I think you're better
Mm,
off to
mm.
learn what you've got, maximize what you've got, and become an expert in what you've got before you start looking at the shiny object every day.
Absolutely, and this is something I try to talk about in the book. Is actually it's a bit of a gory term, so I apologize, but it's called "kill the hostage,"
Oh no,
because
that's a
so many
good term.
businesses, yeah, yeah, so many businesses hold themselves hostage to the tool that they think they need. So a really quick example would be, I want to create YouTube content, and I know that you've
Mhm.
talked with a couple of your colleagues about this on the podcast. I want to create YouTube content, so I have to wait until I can get a 4K camera and a Rode wireless microphone, and that
Nice.
is holding that the technology there of the camera is holding you hostage, and
Mhm.
it's preventing you from growing the business. And a lot of the time we think, yes, but I need to have the world's most complex marketing platform or the best looking website or XYZ before I can do this. And in my circles, I would call that the life lie. And it's exactly as you state, until you are doing it badly and executing the strategy and using what you've got, buying anything will just accelerate the results you're already getting.
Yeah.
And if you're
It's
not getting anything, then I'm gonna 100 times zero is still zero. And I think too many people think that the technology will magically transport them and help them skip some steps,
yeah.
whereas we know that it doesn't.
It's the same problem with podcasting, right? You
Yep.
do some podcasting, I do some podcasting, and people don't jump in. And I have an old saying that says you should the old Nike saying, just do it. Like
Yeah.
do it
Yeah.
and refine it. And
Yeah.
I've done that. I don't know, at the time of this record, I'm about 222 episodes,
Yeah. I know it's
which,
crazy.
which is crazy. And I never thought
Yeah.
I'd be there. And I'm actually doing a talk in a couple weeks at the Adarim Web Agency Summit on how to build your
Uh,
business using a
yes.
podcast.
Yeah. Very good. Excellent. Eight
And
trillion.
one of the things I'm in the process of producing is a little secret and preview is an ebook on
Yep.
some tools to get you started with podcasting without spending the bank on
Yeah. Yeah.
on that. Because I think a little people jump in and say, I need that $400 mic before I'm not
Yeah.
sure what I'm gonna do. I need that $30 a month podcasting plan. I need this. I need that. And before
Yeah.
you know it,
Yeah.
they've spent over $1,000 in technology, and then what are they going to do with it?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, well, and I always find that really funny because let's say you had the world's best camera and podcasting
Yeah.
equipment and studio. I got news for you. No one's going to pay attention to you for the first 50 to 100 episodes anyway.
Hmm.
So, like, you might as well be terrible and get that side of it down. There was an example that my kind of I used to play golf when I was a kid, and I
Oh.
yeah I know. Um, there was a product years ago called the Bald Eagle, and the idea is it was a regular golf ball, but it had 6 bald spots on it. And I remember saying to my golf coach at the time, like, do you reckon that their claims are true, that it can really add 50 to 100 yards? And he said, all you need to know is ask yourself, are the professionals using this right now? Are they using this tool right now? Or did they use that when they started? And you look around and go, no, of course not. They're not using it. It's like, right. So do you really think that if a professional isn't using it to get X amount out of it, and those guys will do everything they can to get the next percent of performance out, then it's never, ever, ever going to make a huge difference to you. Someone could create an outstanding, and we've seen this with films like Upload, for example, that are filmed on like and even back then, it's like a 2017 iPhone. What they can do with an iPhone is way more than I could ever do with, an 8K red camera or something. And so
Yeah.
you're right, just getting into it, doing it badly, and learning the skill set before you start investing into the tools
Yeah.
is. But it's people don't like being told that, for a lot of reasons, I guess.
Yeah, and if you don't try and do it, how do you optimize what you're doing? Which is, as
Yeah,
marketers, the one
yeah,
thing you and I always try and do is optimize what we're doing and be
yeah,
better at it.
hundred percent.
And that's not about throwing, darts at a dartboard. It's about looking at metrics, testing, seeing what works, what doesn't work,
Yeah, yeah,
things like that.
absolutely, 100%. Yeah, singing from the
Um,
same hymn sheet.
yeah, no, I know we are. In the book, what would be the number one point you're trying to get across, would you say?
The number one point would be you can sell as many items as you want, whether it's a product or a service, even if you're unconfident in it, or you're uncomfortable with sales, or your customers seem uninterested. You can sell that same product for as
Mm,
much as you want.
okay.
It's probably not the product's fault. It's probably your fault, but you can still do it. I think a lot of people feel that their product is very boring, or they're unconfident in the results that it can get. This is something that comes up again and again, is things to do with experience. And I believe that one can sell anything they want for as high a price as possible. It's just about getting a couple of things in alignment. And hopefully that's what I want to show with the book, because while I don't want everyone to become, you know, con artists selling snake oil, I
Yes.
believe it's the opposite. I believe it's the opposite problem. I think we've got a marketplace full of extremely talented and experienced um, vendors and service providers and business owners who are not charging what they're worth, and they're not making the sales that they deserve because they have some mindset blocks, or they're not using the right sales process. And
Not charge,
I'd like to change that.
not charging what they're worth. Now that's
Absolutely.
an interesting topic and a road I've been down on this
Yeah.
podcast with other people, myself.
Mm,
And I think I'm a big fan of charging what you're worth. And if somebody doesn't want to buy,
mm,
they're probably not the right client for you
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because they don't value you.
Yeah.
And I think that client wouldn't value you if you charged half. They
No.
would be in the same mindset. And I think
Mm-hmm.
by not charging what you're worth, you actually scare away clients that value
Yeah.
you because they look at you and say, "Why are you charging so less?"
Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. It's it's a it's a it's a sign of quality in a large regards, is having a price which makes people think, oh, okay, I need to pay attention to this, because there's no such thing as middle ground. There's only one person can be the cheapest, and they're
Mhm.
probably owned by Google, so don't why bother going there.
Yeah.
And so, all right, well, let's put a price. I talked about this with a friend of mine today. If I had to start from scratch right now, like everything was taken away from me,
Mhm.
I would immediately go to selling $120,000 product. That's the first thing I would go through. I go, right, who has a $240,000 problem? Because I'm going to charge them $120,000 to fix it.
Yeah.
And $250,000 problem, there's millions of those. A
Mhm.
business doing 2.5 million, they've got a 10%, margin of error on their refunds or whatever. That's a problem that I could sell for half that price. So exactly as you've stated, even if I charge half of that, if someone doesn't understand the value of it, then they're never going to understand the value of it. Because again, to your point, I'm only optimizing what businesses already have.
Yeah.
This is why I think it's so important to work with people who have already got clients, because I can't, even if I double the number of clients you get, if you've got 0 clients, that's still 0 clients. Whereas someone who has clients is actually more likely, and I talk about this in the book, it's a case of who benefits the most from working with you. Someone going from 0 to 10, great, it's admirable, but someone who's going from 10 to 20 is actually benefiting more. They're further down the line. And again, I think we're entitled to work with those types of customers, partly because they're easier.
No, I also think you have to look at what you're charging, what it's worth to the potential customer. And I say that a lot to people. So, a customer selling high end products. So I've
Yep.
got a client right now I'm working with who sells high end car parts, custom car parts for
Yep.
like 60s redesigned, 70s
Yeah.
classic
Beautiful.
cars type of
Yeah.
thing. And I have to tell you, I'm charging him more because I
Yeah.
know exactly what this is worth to his business. And
Yes.
that's part of the pricing scheme. It's not just about throwing a number out there.
No. 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 Exactly. It's like you say. It's if someone is suffering from a $10,000 a day problem, they will gladly pay $10,000 to fix it.
Yep.
You know, it. And I think we too often listen. This is one of the. So we have this triangle for sell futures, not features, and one side of it is uninterested customers. Half of that might be because you're trying to pitch the features and the system and the software or whatever. Half of it might be they're just not interested. It's just not that big a deal to them that they are missing out on $10,000 a day on sales. And if someone doesn't care about that, they don't care about that. There's nothing you can do to change that. It's the difference between want and need. And all too often, I think people, as experts, we say, yes, but you need this in your business. We need that. Unless someone wants it, there's very little you can do to convince them. We know. I mean, you asked me how my health was, which is, good of you to remember. I was given a list of things, and for those who don't know, I had cancer last year, and I was given a list of things that I would have to change and do, and I thought, yeah, fine, I'll do it. That's absolutely fine. But that was what I needed to do. But what I wanted to do was eat burgers and sweets and chocolate all day. And you see that so often. How often do you see that? People being told, you need to change this about your lifestyle, change this. And then they very quickly go back to what they want. And it's the same with business. You can't sell something that someone just needs if they don't also want it. It might not be fair, but that unfortunately is the way that human beings make decisions.
Yeah. And I think when we get back to pricing too, businesses don't always do a good job of distinguishing themselves from other businesses.
Oh,
And
no, not
in
at
our
all.
business, we kind of, the term I like is the inside advantage. And
Yeah.
there's a really good writer by the name of Robert Bloom who wrote a book called The Inside Advantage. And what he talks about is how you make your business stand out and how you make it different, and how
Yeah,
if you
sure.
fight the pricing race to the bottom, you'll be out of business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he talks about that quite frequently. Now, the book was written in 2009, and I think the book is more relevant today than ever before, to be honest with you.
Why do you think that is then? Because I got a theory on that. Why do you think that is, that it's more relevant? Because I also
Um,
agree with
because I think a lot of companies are getting into the price battles, and
you. Yep.
they're oh, I get calls all the time. Oh, I can find somebody that will do it for $500 cheaper. You know what my
Yeah.
response is? Go
Yeah.
ahead, go ahead.
Great. Yeah.
If that's what you need, go ahead. But what I can also tell you is when they come back to me to fix the mess,
Yep.
I'm going to triple the price I was going to give them.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. Of course. I completely agree. Yeah. And the thing is as well, because the barrier to entry for all businesses has
Mhm.
never been easier, and it physically gets easier every day.
Yeah,
The platforms I'm using now, even 5 years ago, would have cost tens of thousands of dollars, let alone 20 years ago when we were both, when I was just getting into marketing. And that's what, when people say, well, I can find someone who can do it for $500, I'm like, yeah, I know you can. And if you try and compete against that same line of reasoning, you will lose, because there will always be someone. And that's why we try to create, and we have to create, an immovable place within the market, which again is mainly kind of focused around our niche. And I know that you and I constantly come back to that word because it's so important, and yet so few people have it. Just before we go on, what was the name of that book you mentioned?
The Inside Advantage, Robert Bloom. Yeah, it's a red cover. It was one that a mentor recommended to me years ago. It's one that I
Awesome.
reread every year.
I'm going to get that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so funny when I see books like this that are published. Well, presumably this was I don't know when the first one was published. Well, it says this one version was 2007, and I'm
Yeah,
always
somewhere in there.
fascinated when
It's a red cover.
yeah, I can see it here. It becomes more true as time goes on. A lot
Yeah.
of people think their book becomes more and more irrelevant, but so often we see things around, growth and strategy, because, like I've said, more and more people are entering the market. There's actually less and less experience among vendors. So it's funny to me that statements like that actually become more true the the older we get. I really like that. I'm always looking for books like that.
No. The excuse me. The other thing I think we have to learn to do in marketing and in any business is, if you want something, ask for it. And
Oh, yeah.
so I'll give you an example of that. And I haven't alluded to this on this podcast yet. I'm working on an interview, on nailing down an interview with Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder
Yeah,
of
yeah.
WordPress right now. And how that came about was, I nicely called him out on Twitter. And I said, I'm looking for an interview, and I wasn't rude about it. It was quite nice. I said, I care about this community. I always have. I'm heavily involved. Do you have time for somebody who cares about the community as much as you do? Very simple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I have several friends up at Automatic, the parent company, and one of them reached out and said, "Oh, by the way, just so you know, I've put you in touch with the head of communications for Automatic to try and get your interview nailed down." So,
Mm,
because I went and asked for it, I'm already in the process of narrowing down dates. Now, dates can take a couple weeks sometimes with
yeah, sure.
executives, and that's fine. But the point of this is not to say people should go bother Matt, not at all. But if you really want something, or you want a guest on your show, or you want something in business, you want a review in business, why don't you
Yeah,
ask the client for the review?
yeah, yeah. And well, again, I have theories as to why people don't do this, but I talk about this in the book as well. Is
Go ahead.
the two keys to negotiation. I think everyone likes to think, especially men, they like to think they're very, very good at negotiation. But the
They're
two
not.
keys are, yeah, well, exactly, they're not, right? And we see this so often. We see this so often. And I think the two keys are, first of all, do you know what you want?
Yeah.
And secondly, does the other person know what you want? And so often when I've done coaching calls and they said, everything from trying to close a customer, as you say, getting referrals is quite a common one that the people have this roadblock. And exactly as you've stated, I'm like, great. Well, how many times have you asked them? They go, oh, I haven't asked them. Like, oh, okay. Do you think maybe that might might indicate why you're struggling to get this particular conversion or problem solved? And again, I don't know. And part of it is, I think, because people they don't write down specifically and with clarity what it is that they want. And the other half is they don't make sure that the other party knows what they want. And you'll skip like 90% of problems as soon as you have those 2 points pushed forwards for whatever it is that you're looking for in your business. And exactly the same: reviews, referrals, even sales. No one's ever
Yeah.
lost a sale from pitching too early. So go for it. Like, the worst that's going to happen is a no.
So true. I'll share with you a review story. I have a good friend of mine who owns a local jewelry store. He does well because he's different than every other jewelry store. So
Yep.
difference is a big deal. And I said to him about 2 years ago, he said, I'm not getting Google reviews. I said,
Yeah.
oh, every time somebody buys something and pays you money, ask them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say,
Yeah.
could you go here and hand them a card and make it
Mm,
easy and say, can you go here and
yeah.
write us a review? Give them the card with their
Yeah.
bill.
Yeah.
And then I said, go one step forward. If somebody walks in and he focuses, I would bet 70% of his business is custom work.
Yep.
And if somebody's got that custom piece that they're just raving about, ask them if they'll shoot a 30-second video
Mm-hmm.
raving about the custom piece and then post a video unedited.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Do you know that he gets an average of 4 or 5 video reviews a week now?
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
because he asks and because
Yeah.
he's saying, let's do it now,
Yeah. Yes.
they don't, people aren't walking away. Because what happens is people have good intentions. They walk away.
Yeah. Of course.
And we all do it. I do it with Amazon. Would you review
Yeah.
this product? Yeah, I'll do it
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it the next day.
Yeah.
And do I ever get to do it? No.
No.
And by asking then and there and making it so easy to do, yeah, it's not a professional 4K camera, but you know what? The new iPhones are pretty good.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, as well, the funny thing is, and again, this is the life lie, and this is why a big part of my overall philosophy is people are goal orientated. So
Mhm.
let's say that your ultimate goal is you think, well, I don't ever want to offend people or upset people because I don't ever want to be disliked. If you say, well, I would hate to ask my customers, can you please give a review? And for them to say no, or you think, well, they can't give a review because it's not a 4K camera and everything's filmed in 4K nowadays, blah, blah, blah. Whatever those excuses are, those aren't real. Those are just really clever motivations that you've made up in order to avoid having to ever, have someone offended or dislike you potentially.
Yep.
But as you stated, 99% of the time, people are actually really happy to do this kind of stuff. Even if you bold-faced ask them for referrals. In fact, that's what we ask for referrals as soon as someone's signed up. I say, great, do you know 2 or 3 other agencies that I could get in contact with? They go, off the top of my head, yeah, I'm sure I do. And I go, great, can you give me some names? They go, give me a couple of days. I go, it's okay, man, take your time, don't worry about it. I don't need them literally this second. Take a few minutes, and eventually they'll come out.
Yep.
People are happy to do it. If you give them direction, and you stated there as well, make it easy for them. Make it easy for them,
Mhm.
and they will way more likely to acquiesce. And you can do some crazy things with those resources when people are on board with you.
Yep. It's so true. Um, did you've done an audio version of the book as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you read it yourself or did you get somebody else to read it for you?
No, so I actually got someone else. I got a colleague of mine, a guy called Robert Plank, to do it. And the reason why, and you won't know this from your side, is I have to mute my microphone every, I don't know, 20 seconds or so, because I have a throat problem, which means I'm constantly coughing, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, I cannot be bothered to do that and edit it. And if you want to talk about some great marketing, when I first released my first book, or whatever, my third book or whatever it was,
Yep.
he said, are you doing an audiobook? And I said, yeah, I'll get round to it. 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 Right. So again, people have the best intentions. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. And he emailed me 3 months later. Have you done it yet? No. 6 months later. Have you done it yet? No. 9 months later. It was like, you could be making 9 months worth of audiobook sales right by now. I went, you know what? You're absolutely right. Fine. He did it. It was great. It was very painless. He uploaded it, took care of everything. And then I figured, let's do the same for this one. And what's really funny is a lot of people say, some people have messaged me and said, you really should have read it yourself, which is interesting to me because I think people overestimate. I would love to have read it myself, and maybe at some point I'll do that. Maybe at some point I'll go into a studio and I'll get someone to help me do it properly, because they've got quite strict, I don't know what you'd call them, laws. No, not laws, like content quality guidelines, I suppose, and I just couldn't be bothered to figure that out. And we're talking about life lies. There's mine. Like, I just couldn't be bothered to do it, I suppose. But I can always do it again in the future. But also, I must have hundreds of hours of content on podcasts and interviews like this and webinars and YouTube. Like, if you're that desperate to listen to me, you can go ahead and do that there. But it's often also, I don't think anyone who has ever released an audiobook and written an audiobook has criticized me for getting someone else to read it, which is always interesting to me. I appreciate that having, what would you call it, external perspective is important. But I've never had anyone who's actually gone through the process say to me, realistically, you should have read your own book. It's always people who haven't done it. So whenever anyone does say, I go, okay, so did you record your audiobook? They go, oh no, I don't have one. Oh, isn't that interesting? So there's pros and cons.
There is.
Yeah.
One thing you just mentioned, really interesting. You've got hundreds of hours of content.
Yeah.
And I was just listening to Russell Brunson yesterday. And we all know who Russell is in the space. He's a bit of a legend over at ClickFunnels.
Yeah.
And Russell was talking about, in a podcast, you should actually record and document everything you do. And his reason he was at that was, you never know where lead magnets or quick info pages or things like that are going to come from.
Sure.
Do you have any feeling on that?
Yeah, and to a large extent, I agree with him. I think people do have this funny thing about like getting Loom and recording. Like, you could record every single hour of your day, all 8 hours of it, and 99.9% of the time, nothing's ever going to come from it. But our entire process system for making sure that my team know what they're doing is based around that. Every time I don't do my core role, anytime I do anything else, I'll do it on Loom and send it over to them, and it's up to them to kind of disseminate it. I do think that content creation can sometimes be a method of avoiding going out and doing sales.
Yes.
So I'm hesitant to say yes, everyone should be producing an hour's or 2 hours worth of content a day. I do believe in documenting what you do. And also, I think people very quickly realize if they start documenting everything they do, they think, oh, actually, I'm wasting an enormous amount of time here now that I go back over. Like, we have a leads tracker. And the amount of times I've tracked the leads that I'm going through, I'm like, oh man, I'm really wasting time on some low quality leads. So documentation is also in some respects or documenting is a culling process or an editing process. So as a very vague rule, yeah, I'd have to agree with him, but I would hesitate to immediately recommend that, because some people often do that as a way of avoiding going out and having sales conversations because they think it can replace that, which personally, I don't think it can.
No, I would agree with you on that one. As we wrap up, is there anything else you want to highlight out of the book?
No, I think most business owners and product creators or whatever don't read sales books because they don't like selling. I'm very privileged in that I like to sell, so it never really mattered to me what I've sold, within reason. Yes. And I think if you are an entrepreneur or a product creator and you think, I really could do with making a little bit more money this year, this is probably a pretty good place to start. And it doesn't mean that you have to become, if anything, it means you become more conversational and more approachable and less salesy, that term that people use, because you're just looking at what it is that you are trying to help the customer achieve. And that does an enormous amount of the heavy lifting rather than trying to do, pressure tactics or, clever closes and things. So yeah, even if you think you hate sales, give it a go. And if you think it sucks, then you can always get a refund or sell it on eBay or use it to whatever you want to do.
What I would suggest to anybody is get the book personally, because knowing the way you write and having your other book sitting beside me, it's going to be well worth the read. So I'll say that right away. And
Appreciate that.
then read it and implement one or two things or three
Sure.
things that you learned in the whole book. Don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I think where people get overwhelmed with courses, with books, with
yeah,
learning is they think because Mike said it, they got to do it all and they got to do it all now.
yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think what you should do is the way I read books like yours is I actually read with a notepad beside me
Yeah,
and I write stuff down that's important to me as
yeah,
I'm reading. And it might be a page reference, it might be a
yeah,
quote, it might be some wording, some verbiage. And then I'll say,
yeah,
what do I need to do to deal with this?
yeah, yeah,
And I think that's the right approach to a book like this, not to say, I'm going to read it all and I'm going to become an expert overnight. That's not going to happen.
yeah. No, not at all. Yeah, not at all. And it's an interesting point you made. Like, of all the books that you and I have read, the scores of them, hundreds of them,
Mhm.
like you say, that there's only ever really one actionable point or one really decent thing worth taking away from them, and it's more important to do something about that rather than trying to eat the whole elephant, um, because it's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. And you can always go back. Like, you can always go back, and there are certainly books that I go back to. But yeah, I appreciate that. I would wholeheartedly agree with you. Just pick one thing, maybe two things, and do them rather than trying to capture everything.
Where's the best way to find a book, Mike?
Uh, if you head to, well, sellfuturesnotfeatures.com is the website, but also if you just search for Michael Killen or Sell Futures Not Features on Amazon at the moment, you can buy it in stores. Well, you will be able to by the time this podcast releases. If you ask for the title, they should be able to get you a print copy in if you want to stop giving Mr. Bezos your money. But also, if you head to mybook.to/futures, that should redirect you to your local Amazon link. So there's plenty of ways to get hold of it.
Yep. And how's the best way to get a hold of you?
Just email me, michael@sellyourservice.co.uk. I respond to all my emails, maybe not immediately, but I do respond to them. So yeah, I'd be delighted to help out or answer any questions people might have.
Yep. Thanks for joining me today to talk about the book and
No,
good luck
thank you for
with the
having me on.
release. And I hope it all
Appreciate it.
goes well.
Thanks very much, mate. Appreciate it.
This episode of the STM show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. A very special thank you to Michael Killen for joining me on this edition of the SDM show. Go out and get his book, Sell Futures, Not Features, on Amazon today. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM show. The SDM show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, make your business succeed.